Well, here's a sentence I'm very happy to say. Carol Burnett, welcome to TCM.
Oh, Dave, I can't tell you how thrilled I am. I watch you guys and all the movies. I TiVo everything.
On Sundays this month in December, you're going to be joining me, and we're going to be showing classic films that you spoofed on your Carol Burnett show in the 1970s. But full disclosure, this was your idea. Let's tell the story. We met at an event for Bob Mackie a couple of months ago.
Well, actually, it was my husband's idea, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
And we had talked about it, and we said, well, yeah, maybe someday. And as luck would have it, you show up at this event for Bob Mackie, and Brian came to you and said, we have this idea, and it would be to show the full real movie, and then after you see the movie, you show the spoof and the takeoff that we did on my show.
Brilliant. We're on board with that idea,
I love it.
Carol.
I love it so much. I'm so excited.
We are very excited, and we're going to start off with not only one of the most popular and beloved films of all time, but perhaps the film that you are best known for spoofing, and that's Gone with the Wind from 1939. And it blew my mind when you told me that you were 6 years old when this film came out.
1939.
Did you see it in a theater? Do you remember that far back?
I do remember, and then I fell asleep because it was 4 hours
It's a bit long.
I was a kid.
Right.
And then I had seen it subsequently, whenever it was rerun or so on. And so when we wanted to do our takeoff, what happened was they had redone it, I think, fixed it, the colors or whatever, and it was a whole big thing they were advertising that it was going to be on television.
That's right.
And so we thought, okay, for those of you who can't spend all the time watching, just watch this because we're doing our version, and we called it Went with the Wind.
Yes, of course you did.
And it was written by one of our writers whose essay in college was Gone with the Wind.
And this is Rick Hawkins, is that right?
Rick Hawkins.
So when you were a young girl, I know that you and your grandmother used to go to the movies together. Why was that such an important thing for the two of you, and how often would you go?
I was born in Texas, and the first time I remember we would go to the movies, I had to be 3 or 4 because my feet didn't touch the floor. We didn't have any money, really. So what pennies we had, we saved to escape. It was a depression. So we would go to the movies in Texas, and then we moved out to Hollywood. I lived a block north of Hollywood Boulevard. The movies were our escape. And everything worked in the movies. I mean, the good guys made it. The bad guys didn't. Nothing was cynical. And so I fell in love with Judy and Mickey, Betty Grable, Rita Hayworth, Lana Turner, of course, Jimmy Stewart, and all. And later on, when I got my show, I got to know all of them and work.
They came on the show, Rita, Lana
Turner, Betty Grable, Bing Crosby. If my grandmother had been alive, that would have killed her.
Well, when you think to the film, Gone with the Wind, what is it about it that you like? Are there specific characters or plot lines that you find yourself most attracted to?
Well, I think the chemistry, although from what I read or heard, there wasn't great chemistry between Vivien Leigh and Clark Gable, am I right?
Sometimes that works. Obviously, it's Vivien Leigh, Scarlett, that you spoof as Starlet. What is it about her performance that you think is so great?
What can I say? She is Scarlett O'Hara. And I know the background and everything, she's British. And of course, the British can do a Southern accent.
They can do any accent.
Beautifully, because there are no R's. The letter R, they don't say that.
Right.
In England, and they don't say it in the South. In the Deep South. So she came by it naturally. And of course, she's both lovable and devilish and sometimes not very nice. But in the end, you love her. And she was a shining, shining star.
Well, let's watch the movie, and then we'll talk more about it afterwards. And of course, we'll show your sketch.
Okay.
But here, from 1939, the winner of 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Actress for Vivien Leigh. Here is Gone with the Wind. Well, Well, that was the 4 hours of Gone with the Wind. Did you stay awake this time?
I certainly did.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So now we're going to fast forward 37 years to season 10 of the Carol Burnett Show,
Yes.
when you spoofed it with Went with the Wind,
Right.
1976. So what should people know about this sketch before they watch it if they're seeing it for the first time?
Well, one of the things is Vicki Lawrence. She knocks it out of the park, playing a combination of Hattie McDaniel and Butterfly McQueen.
So funny.
So we made that a combination. And she steals every scene she's in.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of her.
Harvey Korman,
Oh,
this is a
Harvey.
highlight for him.
Yeah, he channeled Clark Gable. He looks like him. You
Yeah,
know,
he really
Bob
does.
Mackey put him in that outfit and the mustache.
The
and all.
darker makeup.
Yeah, and the way first his lips, he did, I don't know how Gable did, you know, is Miss Scarlett at home or something? I don't know. But he was brilliant.
Well, there's so much to love about this sketch. Let's check it out. From 1976, from the Carol Burnett Show, here is Went with the Wind. Carol, I mean, come on. That sketch has to be the one that most people want to talk to you about when they want
Quite
to
a
talk
bit.
about this show.
Quite a bit. The writers had written that I would, on the curtain dress, that I would take the curtain dress, run up the stairs, and come back down with them just kind of hanging. And our genius, Bob Mackey, said, you know, that's not that funny. And he called our scenic designer and he said, can you send me a curtain rod and some of the material? And I went in for a costume fitting, and Bob said, come on into the room. I have an idea here. And I walked in, and on the mannequin was the curtain rod and all. I laughed so hard. I said, Bob, this is going to be one of the greatest sight gags in the history of television.
You were right.
And it is. And Bob laughs today. He says, that's going to be in my tombstone.
Yeah, that's true.
It's in the Smithsonian.
Isn't that wild? It's where it deserves to be. And it's not just the curtain rod dress. I mean, it's the dialogue. I saw it in the window. I just couldn't resist it.
I mean, that was brilliant when out of that huge laugh coming down the stairs for him to say that dress is gorgeous and the light, thank you, I saw it in the window and I just couldn't resist it, almost topped the whole thing of coming down the stairs. It was hard for me, though, because the curtain rod dress was, we changed real fast while Vicki and Harvey were having a scene below. I never liked to stop tape. I wanted it like a Broadway show. And so I had a little place, and Bob Mackey was up there with my dresser, who was about 4'10", and they putting that heavy thing on. And then walking out in front of the audience for the first time, it was a clap of thunder. I'd never heard laughs like that. And as I'm coming down the stairs, I had to bite my cheek to keep from laughing. I was like, whoa, this reaction is incredible.
Is it true that it actually had to get edited down, some of the laughter?
Some of it. It was long. It was
too
that
long.
It was that long. And I get pushed down the stairs and knocked down the stairs as Starlet 3 times in the sketch. So on Friday, when we taped it, we had a run through in the morning, so 3 times, a dress rehearsal in front of an audience at 5 o'clock, 3 times, 6 times, and the air show 3 times. So that one day, I fell down those stairs 9 times.
How did you do it?
Carefully. Very carefully. I taught myself how to do stunts way, way back when I was doing the Gary Moore show. I don't know how. Nobody ever taught me. But I realized if I'm going to fall down those stairs, I had to be loose. I had to go like this instead of
Right.
you know,
Tensing up.
Tensing up. So I never, ever hurt myself. I got a few bruises occasionally, but never broke anything or had anything serious happen. Oh,
Yeah.
my goodness. I used to jump out of windows and walk into walls.
Well, yeah, because if you watch closely with the staircase where you're rolling down, you're kind of rolling in bits. So
Exactly.
it's calculated.
Exactly.
And what was Dinah Shore's reaction to this whole thing? She seemed very game.
Oh, she loved it. Dinah was such a doll. And the thing is that when I did my show, our show, we would have singers on or dancers on. And most of the time, if they did a variety show, they would just do their number and maybe a finale. I always wanted to use them in sketches. Or Cheetah Rivera, Gwen Verdon,
Right.
Juliette Prowse. Not only did they do their thing, Dinah was all for it. She just loved it. And I loved when she's on the stairs and she's Bye, all.
All right, so great.
She throws that kiss.
Speaking of the staircase, first of all, your show loved a staircase. I mean, so many of these spoofs have great staircases in them. But when Harvey is lifting you up and carrying you up the stairs, there's almost a moment where I felt like I heard you say, just keep going.
Yeah,
to him.
because he accidentally stepped on my petticoat. And he thought we should stop or something. And I said, just keep going. It's okay.
Always the professional. The show must go on.
Absolutely.
It really is one of many memorable moments that we're going to be talking about all month on TCM. So will you come back next week and we'll do 2 more?
I promise. Thank you.
Carol Burnett, thanks so much. All right, stick around because coming up next, another great film here on TCM, as always, uncut and commercial free. Carol Burnett, welcome back to TCM.
Thank you, Dave.
It's the second night of our Sundays with Carol series here in December, where we show classic films and then your Carol Burnett show spoof of that film. We are here on the Warner Brothers lot, and we've created this special set.
I love that so much.
With the green curtains to commemorate your iconic Went with the Wind
That is
curtain rod dress.
so clever.
Tonight we've got a great double bill. I'm going to call these guilty pleasure films. The first one is Born to be Bad from 1950, directed by Nicholas Ray, and starring Joan Fontaine, along with Joan Leslie and Robert
Zachary
Ryan and
Scott.
Zachary Scott.
Yeah.
So in this movie, Joan Fontaine plays this very ambitious young woman who moves in with a woman who works for her uncle, who runs a publishing company, and very soon she starts wreaking havoc on everyone's lives. She has a man in her sight. She's going to stop at nothing to get what she wants, and it's so much fun to watch.
Oh, yeah, and Joan Leslie is engaged to Zachary Scott, who is filthy rich.
Right.
So this is what Joan Fontaine is after, and she makes no bones about it. She's going to take him away from Joan Leslie by any means necessary.
Yeah.
And so it was fun to play. They do a lot of close-ups of her with an evil look.
Yes.
Which I glommed onto.
You had to.
In the sketch, and it's something like that, almost to the camera.
Right. You had to.
And so, of course, we use that a whole lot in the spoof.
Even in the very first scene where we meet Joan Fontaine's character in this film, at the end of the scene, the camera kind of lingers on her. It's this very knowing look. What do you think it is about these kind of conniving women roles? I mean, I'm thinking about Anne Baxter and All About Eve. I mean, this was a time where there were a few of these happening. What do you make of that? Do you like these kind of
I
performances?
love it. And, and as an actress, they're fun to play. Even the spoofs, of course,
Yeah,
but
right.
Even if you're going to do a villain, is, to me, a lot more fun to play than somebody who's just so sweet.
That's true. And the guys in here are great. Zachary Scott is terrific, and we'll see him later this month because we're going to show Mildred Pierce later this
Right.
month. And I love Robert Ryan.
Oh, I did too. He was one of my favorite actors.
So dashing in this one
Yeah.
particularly. And Robert Ryan is kind of the one guy who can see through the deception, which makes the chemistry between him and Joan Fontaine all the more
Yeah,
interesting.
that's pretty hot.
This is a film that is really a delicious kind of soap opera. Do you remember in the 40s and 50s, were those the kind of movies that you would love
They
seeing?
were the kind of movies my grandmother adored. We lived in one room, a block north of Hollywood Boulevard, and she slept on the Murphy bed, and I slept on the couch. And she would always, before we would go to bed, she'd look under the Murphy bed, and I said, Nanny, who are you looking for? She said, Randolph Scott.
Oh.
She was
good
into
taste.
movies, but it was always a big joke. And she'd go, Clark Gable, Robert Taylor.
Oh, that's great. Well, this is a great one, and this might be one that some people might not have seen before, so it might be a little discovery for them. It's
Right.
a lot of fun. Let's
Right.
check it out, then we'll talk more about that and your spoof. Here it is from 1950, directed by Nicholas Ray, Joan Fontaine in Born to be Bad. Okay, Carol, the only thing more delicious than the movie Born to be Bad is your takeoff, Raised to be Rotten from 1973. And we should tell people they should look out for Richard Crenna in the Robert Ryan role.
Richard Crenna, Harvey in the Zachary Scott role, and Ruth Buzzy, in the Joan Leslie role.
All right, was it fun to work with
Oh,
them?
my gosh, yes. Of course, Harvey had the greatest comedy chops of an actor. I mean, brilliant. And Richard Crenna, he was so funny and sexy.
It's so fun to watch.
And then at the end, it was so good. And I don't want to give away our ending.
Well, we'll come back and talk about it. Let's check it out from 1973 from The Carol Burnett Show, Raised to be Rotten. Carol Burnett, so happy to be back with you on the second night of our Sunday Nights with Carol series.
I love being here. Thank you.
Good. This is kind of a guilty pleasure night. We just showed Born to be Bad, Joan Fontaine, and your spoof Raised to be Rotten. Now we have a terrific Joan Crawford drama in Technicolor. 1953 Torch Song, which you spoofed as Torchy Song. This really is Joan Crawford 2.0, if you will, at her best. I mean, this was a few years after she had won her Oscar for Mildred Pierce, which we're going to show later this month as part of this series. Is this a favorite Joan Crawford film and performance of yours?
I loved it. She loved when we did Mildred Pierce.
Oh.
I'll get into that later
Yeah.
when we show it, but I got the word that she was not happy with the spoof. I'm wondering if it's because the movie was not a hit.
Right.
You know, I was doing a takeoff on the movie, but maybe she felt it was a little Mean? I don't know.
How interesting.
Yeah.
Well, for anyone who doesn't know the film, she plays this Broadway star who's very demanding.
Yep.
And she meets a new rehearsal pianist played by Michael Wilding, who was married to Elizabeth Taylor at the time, and he's blind. And this encounter really changes her life, changes her whole perspective on things. It's a classic Joan Crawford role because she is tough but also vulnerable.
I thought she was wonderful in it, and I was just sorry to hear that she wasn't pleased with this takeoff.
Yeah, that's too bad. What intrigues you about the movie, though? What I love about it, as someone who loves All About Eve as much as I do, this is also a great backstage story and a great character study. What do you like about this movie?
Well, she chewed up the scenery.
For sure.
But great. I mean, it was great. And so that gave me an opportunity to chew up the scenery, too. So
absolutely.
There's nothing more fun than chewing up the scenery.
Yeah. The director here is Charles Walters, who also did Lily and Unsinkable Molly Brown. And Charles Walters was also a dancer.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of the movie, you see him. He's actually the dancer that Joan is dancing with, who kind of messes up one of the steps and gets berated. But I think it's just so interesting that he cast himself as this not so great dancer.
Well, he's a choreographer.
That's right.
Yeah.
Joan is not doing her own singing in this movie. She was dubbed by India Adams, who also dubbed Sid Charisse in The Bandwagon. But it is really fun to see Joan Crawford do musical numbers, even if she's not singing.
Well, I think there's some footage somewhere where she is singing with her own voice. And it was pretty good.
It was pretty good.
I don't know why they didn't let her do it.
Yeah, I think maybe in order to be truly believable as this phenomenal star, maybe they needed someone with a little bit stronger pipes. But isn't it fun to see Joan Crawford in color? You don't get to see that very often.
She looked great.
She does look great.
Great legs, and fantastic.
Yes, it is really about Joan Crawford's legs. They're almost like an entire character. The pose, which is going to come up in the spoof afterwards, so I'll be asking you about that. Right now, let's watch the movie. Here is Joan Crawford in Technicolor from 1953 in Torch Song. All right, Carol, now that we've watched Torch Song, we have to watch Torchy Song, which is your version from 1977. And this is interesting because I would imagine that there were a lot of people who hadn't necessarily seen the movie Torch Song.
It wasn't the hit that Mildred Pierce was.
Right, but you still wanted to do a spoof.
Well, yes, it was like Born to be Bad.
Ripe for the picking.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's watch the sketch, and then I have some specific questions about it.
Okay.
Make sure you check out Carol's leg. Here it is from the Carol Burnett Show in 1977, Torchy Song. Okay, so Carol, are we to understand that the two characters do not stay together at the end of this sketch because he's in the piano?
No, because at first she's succumbed to his wishes that she just be a housewife.
Right.
And have a bunch of babies and cook and sew and da-da. And once she realizes that's what he means, I'm not going to give up being a star for that. So she has the boys put him in the piano and she just sits on it and she's home again on Broadway.
It's where she needs to be.
Yeah.
And again, yes, so your romantic side is nowhere to be found. But at the same time, yes, that's what you had to do.
Yeah.
You had to do your own twist on it.
And I loved Harvey. I mean, come on. We didn't make him blind. We made him nearsighted.
Very nearsighted.
He keeps walking into walls. He was so good.
Let's talk about the poses because that's what it's about. I mean, that must have been one of the main reasons you wanted to do this in the first place, just so that you could do all of
pose,
that.
Well, it always made me laugh when I saw the movie. You know, and I thought, well, we got to do that, you know.
I know it was very important to you never to stop the role, never to do something over. And the result in this one is a really fun moment where there's where you flub a line and Harvey even says, I can't see and you can't talk.
Right.
I mean, but that's part of the fun of it, right?
No, that was an ad lib because I screwed up a line.
Right.
And that's when he said, I can't see and you can't talk.
Right. So was there ever a time where like a director said, oh, Carol, are you sure you don't want to do that over? And you said no, or was it just understood?
It was understood. Because sometimes you want to keep it, even if a mic came into the shot, if you're on a roll, and we had a live studio audience, and I wanted always to do our show in under like 2 hours. Because we would take, 55 minutes, whatever it was, with all the musical numbers, all the sketches, all the changes, all that. I want our studio audience to be entertained because they give us our impetus.
Right.
So if they're bored or sitting there waiting for somebody to change the clothes or the scenery or this or that, you lose them. So I said, no, well, I'm theater trained. So that's what that was about. Yeah.
I want people to know about two guys who appear in many of your sketches, but particularly in this one. There's a moment where you're standing at the front of the stage and you've got these two guys next to you who were two of your dancers, Don Crichton and Randy Doney,
Yes.
both of whom I know, and they're both still with us, and just lovely guys, but terrific performers and stalwarts
Absolutely.
in the show, and great friends of yours.
Yeah, I'm still Don Crichton. I just talked to him. And September 3rd was his 90th birthday.
Fantastic.
He lives back east, and I've known him since I did the Gary Moore show, and I was 25. And Randy Doney, and he's the one that she, in the pose, she tears them apart.
Right.
You know, that was Randy. And what's good is that, you know, they're brilliant, brilliant dancers. Ernie Flatt was our choreographer. So good. And yet, we always put the dancers in the sketches, and they were able to do it. They were very good, and so it was a rep company.
Yeah.
You know.
Don Crichton had a big role in Went with the Wind.
Yes.
They're both so fun to watch, and I'm so glad that they're both still with us.
Yep.
And it's great to see their work from all these years ago. All right, Carol, hopefully I'll see you again next week for two more films.
Absolutely, you bet.
All right, see you soon. In the meantime, stick around because Jacqueline Stewart is coming up next with this week's edition of Silent Sunday Night. Carol Burnett, welcome back to TCM for the third night
I love it.
of our co-hosting stint. We've got two more great films that we're going to show along with your legendary spoof sketches from the Carol Burnett Show. We're going to start off with The Heiress from 1949, starring Olivia de Havilland and Montgomery Clift, that you parodied as the Lady Heir.
Yeah.
And it's just such a great performance, not only by Olivia, but by you as well. William Wyler is the director here. This is a personal favorite of mine. I just think Olivia de Havilland in this film is remarkable.
She is, especially in the beginning, how she is so shy and frightened of anything social, and how he treats her father, with just such disdain, and she takes it. And then she becomes hardened like steel. She was lovely.
And it's also so fascinating to watch her performance because when she meets Montgomery Clift's character, you see this sexual awakening, if you will.
Yes.
Even this is 1949 and not much is really shown or talked about. You see her life changing before our eyes. And it's just remarkable. She won an Oscar for this performance. There's just something about Olivia de Havilland and everything that she does.
But it was so funny how she became plain, and she was one of the most beautiful actresses we ever had on the screen.
Yeah.
And there was that hairdo, and I think they did something to her eyebrows. They were making them
They must have.
something, but they didn't do anything else, and yet she conveyed that whole thing about being holy. And then later on, they softened the hair. They did a little
She
bit.
blossomed a bit.
Yeah, maybe she tweezed the eyebrows a bit. I don't know.
And it's just, of course, it's based on Washington Square by Henry James. So, of course, it has, great literary history behind it. But, yeah, you mentioned Ralph Richardson. The whole cast is terrific. And I would imagine that when you were thinking about the different kind of characters that you wanted to do takeoffs on, this must have been just at the top of the list.
Oh, it was. And so it was perfect because we had Roddy McDowell on, and we said, would you be happy doing Montgomery Clift?
Yes.
Absolutely.
How flattering.
And in it, our makeup and hair curled his hair. That wasn't what Montgomery Clift looked like, but they did that with Roddy, and it changed his whole personality.
Huh. So you were a teenager when this film came out in 1949. Do you remember? Is this one that you might have seen with your grandma?
I loved it. And when he's banging on the door at the end,
Yeah.
I kind of felt sorry for him.
And it's the mystery of the movie. Does he love her or is it just for the money?
Right.
You change your mind as the movie goes on.
Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating. Let's watch it and then we'll talk about your spoof afterwards.
Okay.
From 1949, directed by William Wyler, here are Olivia de Havilland and Montgomery Clift in The Heiress. It is a tragic love story.
It is.
And you're right, you do kind of feel bad at the end that it didn't quite work out. You still root for them, even though in your heart of hearts you know maybe they weren't right for each other.
But she could have had a few good years maybe with him.
Maybe a couple.
As she said to her father, you know.
Yeah, it's true.
Why not?
Right.
Why couldn't I have at least that?
So in 1975, on the Carol Burnett show, of course, you did a takeoff sketch on this, The Lady Air.
Yeah.
Before people watch it, was it fun for you to kind of get a little bit
Ugly. Not a little bit.
Right, yeah.
I'm pretty ugly. I think we made it even worse, the hairdo and all of that. And then I was slumping around and stuff. And Harvey was brilliant as the father.
Ralph Richardson, yeah.
And Vicky as her aunt. And then Roddy coming in being very charming and sleazy at the same time.
Oh, yes.
He was a good friend. I loved Roddy.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, he was on the show quite a bit. There was a lot of shtick, and you know, when I hide in the piano and
There's a lot
stuff
of great
and
stuff.
we certainly changed the ending.
Yes, we will discuss that ending for sure. Let's check out the sketch from 1975 from the Carol Burnett show. Here is The Lady Air. Okay, as promised, let's talk about this ending. Do you mean the dynamite? Is that what
Yeah.
you're talking about? Was that one of the biggest, let's say, action sequences that you all did over
We
the course
did a
of the show?
lot, and you know, it was amazing without any retakes or anything. Our crew was terrific. We didn't do it until we were shooting it.
Really?
Yeah, but they knew what they were doing. And, you know, there's a huge explosion at the end when poor Norris takes the satchel and the Lady Air is looking out the window and she knows he's got money inside. And she says, if he opens that up,
Boom.
he opens it up and there's this huge explosion, you know, and that's the end. And she's just fine with it, you know.
Right.
She totally offs him.
Right. Was it fun for you and your writers to come up with alternate ways to end these things?
Oh, yeah. Well, that was from the get-go. The writers came up with that. So there was no other way to, I thought that we should end it. You know, if we did it the way the movie was, it would, people knew that.
Right, you got to do your twist on it.
Yeah.
Well, I also was thinking as I was watching this one, and this is a shorter one. This is
Yes,
about
it is
10
short.
minutes.
Right.
You're doing essentially the entire arc of the character and the movie in 10 minutes, which is so fun. Did that present a challenge, or was that just part of the silliness of
Well,
it?
like Gone with the Wind was very long.
Right.
Very long. And we did long form a lot. And I remember Laugh-In was on at one point, the same time we were. And some of the writers, after a while, from Laugh-In who wrote quick jokes, they wanted to come over and write long form. And some of our long form writers went over and wrote. It was like a whole community of different writers and stuff that we had. And but I always wanted to develop it. And what was nice was the network let us do that. Instead of saying you're going to lose the audience, give the audience the credit for being able to follow it and enjoy the journey along the way before we got to the ending.
Well, you keep us along with all of the jokes throughout it. Did you ever hear from Olivia de Havilland? Did you ever meet her over the years?
No, I did meet her once. She was having lunch in the Valley with a friend of mine, but that was before we did The Lady Air. So
Okay. I
I think she would have gotten a kick out of it.
Would you say, in a general sense, that you did these sketches because you wanted to keep the classic film era alive, kind of how we try to do it here on TCM?
Well, no, but now that you mention it, maybe that's
Just
a
play along
good
with
reason.
it. Right.
Because as I say, I grew up watching movies, and I used to come home from seeing a movie when I was in the 40s, say, and my best girlfriend, Isla Mae was her name, and I would pretend to be Betty Grable and June Haver, and we would do the whole thing. And so it was like, I was doing it when I was a kid.
Right.
We would go up on the hill and I'd be Tarzan, never Jane, but Tarzan, or Sheena, Queen of the Jungle or something, always acting out.
Right.
So when I got my show, oh my gosh, I had costumes, I had scenery, I had music, I had everything there. And it was just, I was a kid in a candy store.
We're so glad you did all these because it's so fun to watch,
you.
even these years later. All right, don't go anywhere because Carol and I will be right back to show another terrific film and her spoof of it. This one, a Betty Davis drama from 1946. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, Carol Burnett. So happy to be with you tonight.
Thank you.
We've got another great film to talk about, along with your spoof sketch of it from the Carol Burnett Show. This time it's A Stolen Life from 1946, starring Bette Davis and and Glenn Ford, directed by Curtis Bernhardt. I love Bette Davis, and I love this performance, this dual performance by her. Were you always a Bette Davis fan?
Yes, I always was. I got to meet her actually at Roddy McDowell's house.
Oh.
Every Wednesday night, Roddy would have what they call a salon, and he'd have different people come in, and you'd sit around in the living room and have a cocktail, and you'd go in and have dinner, and you'd come back into the living room again, and people would talk and tell stories and all. And Bette Davis was there one night, Ava Gardner, Alec Guinness, Edith Head, and because I was a buddy, he said, any Wednesday you want to come. Just so I didn't take advantage.
Right.
But I always sat in a specific chair next to the fireplace, and the couch was here, and then people were all around and tell stories.
Wow.
And when he passed away, Roddy, he left me that chair. And I have that chair in my office.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Did you kind of sit more and observe at these salons, or were you active?
I observed more than I contributed,
Right.
but I certainly was a good audience, I'll put it that way.
It must have been interesting for you to see then which of these people that you knew and loved were more interested in talking to you, because there must have been a lot of them that were watching your show.
How long does it take you to learn it? On and on and on. But just to hear Edith Head talking about how she would be fitting somebody in the fitting room.
Did you talk to Bette Davis at all?
Oh, yeah. She was very sweet. And she did Mr. Skeffington. There are moments all the way through where she says, I can't see you now. I'm having lunch with Janie Clarkson. And of course, you never see Janie Clarkson. And so Roddy and I had a joke about that. So she signed a picture to me saying, Carol, dear, I have to say, I'm patting myself on the back, but this is what she wrote. Carol, dear, you are permanently terrific. Love, Janie Clarkson.
Wow. That's
on my wall.
Oh, my God, how wonderful. Well, let's talk about A Stolen Life, because it is remarkable what they were able to accomplish in 1946 with the very convincing special effects, which, by the way, got an Oscar nomination that year for special effects.
So she plays a good twin and an evil twin.
Yeah.
Yeah, and each one is totally different. She was a great actress.
Right. Did you find that you really liked these kind of soap opera-ish films when you were a teenager?
Oh, yeah. Way back in the early covered wagon days, they used to call them women's pictures.
Women's pictures.
It's a woman's picture.
Right.
Today, that sounds terrible.
Right. I call them all my favorite movies.
Yeah, right. But that would be what they called a woman's picture. Any of those, tear jerkers.
That's right. And of course, Bette Davis also was a producer on this movie, so she got to choose some of the other people that she was working with, the director, and also Glenn Ford. And I love the two of them together.
They were great.
It makes you understand why both these women want to fall for this guy.
Yeah.
It was great. So was this an easy decision as far as a movie that you were going to do a takeoff of?
Absolutely. And I'll get into the detail about how we did it later.
Okay, great. Well, let's watch the movie and then we'll talk more about it and your spoof afterwards.
Okay.
From 1946, here is Bette Davis in a terrific dual performance in A Stolen Life. I just love that film. I love Bette Davis doing something with a high difficulty like that. She did it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your version of this, A Swiped Life from 1976. A dual performance by you, actually a triple performance, because you're one twin, you're the other twin, and then you're also one twin pretending to be the other twin. So it's three performances.
Well, that's what she did.
And that's what she did too.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about this, before people watch it, is that, of course, you didn't have a special effects budget. So you had to figure out creative ways to
be
play...
a twin without stopping tape. So it'd be funny. I would be Patsy, who was the dull one.
Yep.
And I would walk behind the set or behind a wall or something.
Right.
And then I would change real fast and run around here and come in as the evil one.
Right.
And I would talk to her, and then I would turn around and my voice would be the other one. So I was having dialogue
with yourself.
And at one point, I remember, didn't I stick my head out or something, and I'm talking, the other one's over there, and
Right.
it was It was such fun.
Oh,
And we did it live. We did not stop.
All right, well, we'll watch the sketch right now, and then I have more questions for you. Okay. But right now, from the Carol Burnett Show in 1976, here is Carol playing Patsy and Vera in A Swiped Life. That one is a real favorite of mine, Carol. It's just so fun to watch you do that, particularly when Vera comes in, because that's when you really get to do Betty to the hilt. Just the
overdone, I must say, because she did not do. I was breathing funny, right. And I just kept doing it, but she wasn't quite that.
It's always exaggerated, but always at the line.
Wasn't that what he said? Hey is for horses or something like that.
I love that, and I love the foghorn. How did that come about?
It was just there. It was improvised because the writers said the thing was Patsy, who is the dull one. She loves watching the lighthouse go around, and it talks to me. She says to her aunt, it says, "Hi, Patsy. Hi, Patsy." And I thought, what if I do it like a lighthouse? And I went, it talks to me. It says, "Hi, Patsy. Hi, Patsy. Hi, Patsy." I love it. I just wonderful,
I could not get enough of that. And you could tell the audience couldn't either. I mean, each time it happened, it got such a great...
It was fun to do.
Laugh. Yeah. When did you start doing these spoofs? I mean, the ones that we're showing are from the later years, like season 7, 8, 9, 10. But you were telling me you did Postman Always Rings Twice a little bit earlier and some other ones.
But it wasn't the exact takeoff on the movie. It was a sketch about her being married to this old guy, and Steve Lawrence comes in as the John Garfield role. And she says, when are we going to kill him? Is that kind of thing. So we did that, but then way early on, we did a whole show on the Dolly Sisters, the entire movie.
The Doily Sisters.
We called it the Doily Sisters. That was in our 5th season, and Vicki and I played the sisters, and Harvey was the John Payne role, and all original music and lyrics by our writers, by our special material writers. And then the first one we did was a takeoff on the backstage vaudevillian family called the Fun Family with Mickey Rooney. He was Papa, I was Mama, Vicki was Sissy, and John Davidson was Sonny. Harvey comes in and says, "I'm looking for a patriotic trio." And then we figure out there are 4 of us. So there's only 3 in a trio, so poor Mickey is out. And it's a whole saga about that family. And
oh, how fun.
Yeah, and he was wonderful.
Did you find that as time went on, these spoof sketches became amongst the more popular ones that the audiences loved?
Yeah. And what's interesting about doing them is that if you don't know the movie, they're funny. But if you do know the movie, they're twice as funny.
That's right.
But they hold up even on their own if you don't know the movie.
It's so true. Well, we'll take a week off for Christmas, but how about you come back and do one more week of these with me at the end of December, right?
Merry Christmas, ho, ho, ho.
Okay, great. See you soon. All right, stay tuned because coming up next year on TCM, another fantastic movie, uncut and commercial-free. Carol Burnett, welcome back for the final night of Sunday Nights with Carol.
I've had such a good time. Thank you.
Tonight, we're doing a bit of a noir double feature.
Yeah.
2 terrific films on their own, but also films that you spoofed to perfection. The first one is Mildred Pierce from 1945, directed by Michael Curtiz, the movie that Joan Crawford won her Oscar for. Would you say Joan Crawford was a favorite actress of yours when you were growing up?
Yes, I would say that. And I love Bette Davis, and of course they were not. But the thing that Bette Davis said about Joan was, even though they didn't like each other, she said Joan Crawford was very professional, on time, knew her lines. She said, I will give her credit for that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, this is arguably her best performance. I think she gets to show so many different colors in this.
Right.
She's like an independent woman, but she's also berated by her daughter, played by Anne Blythe. This movie is also really interesting because it mixes genres. I think it is a woman's picture, but it also has these murder noir elements to it. Is that what you like about it?
The whole thing. I mean, I love the whole movie. And Zachary Scott was so deliciously evil. She starts out vulnerable, yet the way her daughter treats her, she's a sap.
Yeah, it's so true.
In a way.
You know, there's this kind of subgenre of great mother-daughter stories. I would say Stella Dallas
Yeah.
or Imitation of Life, both versions of that, but particularly the Lana Turner version. You're a mom of daughters. I mean, did you find that mother-daughter stories on screen are some of your favorites?
Yes, and in fact, maybe there might be a story that I wrote about Carrie and me. A mother-daughter love story is what it's called. So there's talk about doing it.
That's very exciting. When you were thinking about which films to spoof, this one came a little bit later. This was in the 10th season that you did this one. Was this one that you kind of had in your mind to do for a long time?
I think it was, and then we wound up doing other stuff. But then the writers came up with this idea and how to do it. And Vicki was perfect for it. She was great in the Anne Blythe role. I'm just so proud of her. We got her when she was 18 years old.
Unbelievable.
Out of high school. And boy, did she learn. She was like a sponge. And she wound up being really a brilliant comedian.
Fantastic. Of course, as I mentioned, this is Joan Crawford's Oscar-winning performance, and very famously, she did not go to the ceremony. She
Right.
was sick,
Yeah.
but managed to get well enough to take a photo.
pose
Right.
in the bed.
You've won so many different awards, whether it's Emmys and everything. Can you imagine not going to a ceremony to accept an award and saying that you were sick?
No, I can't.
Right.
I can't. She was scared maybe,
Right.
and didn't want to have to sit there and smile if somebody else got it.
Right. It's so Joan.
So she knew what she was doing.
Well, it's a very deserving win.
Yes,
Let's
it
watch
is.
the movie, and then we'll talk more about your spoof of
Okay.
it. Here it is from 1945, Joan Crawford and Mildred Pierce. Okay, Carol. We love Mildred Pierce, but we also love Mildred Fierce. And this came 31 years after the movie
Wow.
in 1976, season 10. Do you want to tee it up for the audience?
Here is now, for your enjoyment, I hope, Mildred Fierce.
That really is one of my favorites, and I think the
Mine
way
too.
that you all did it is so fun. Your writers really,
They really-
outdid themselves on that one.
Yeah.
This one is firing on all cylinders, from the comedy to the casting, but I want to talk about your look. I mean, you've got the eyebrows on. What was your reaction when you saw yourself?
That was Bob Mackey. And Joan Crawford called me afterwards. I was so thrilled. And she said, I absolutely loved it. And I said, oh, thank you, Miss Crawford. And she said, well, you know what? You gave us more production value than that, and she did an expletive, than that effing Jack Warner.
Oh, gosh.
I screamed with laughter.
Which is funny because I think Mildred Pierce, the movie from the 40s, looks great.
I do too, but for some reason, I think she was just being flattering, you know. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Let's talk about that beautiful dress that you have with strawberries on it. That's another terrific Bob Mackey
Oh,
creation.
Bob Mackey. Well, he designed 60 to 75 costumes a week. You do the math, 11 years, it's about 17,000 costumes. He came up with everything everybody wore, not just what I wore.
And the great thing about Bob, I've gotten to know him, even though he's not the kind of person who's going to make you howl with laughter when you're sitting with him at dinner, he's got such a great sense of humor.
It's totally. There were times there would be a sketch that I wasn't sure how I was going to play her until I went into the fitting. And Bob said, this is how I see her. And I'd put on the outfit and I'd say, oh, that's who she is.
Oh, wow.
Then that gave me my character.
Let's talk about Vicki Lawrence, because
Oh.
I do think as Vita, this is one of the ones where she really got to show
Wasn't
her
she
stuff.
wonderful? She wrote me a fan letter when she was 17 years old, and we were about to do the show. And at one point, we were going to do a sketch every so often where Harvey and I would be a married couple raising my kid's sister. Okay, it's called Carol and Sis. We didn't do it all the time. So we auditioned her. She was in a contest in Inglewood called Miss Fireball of Inglewood. And we went to the contest because she told me in her fan letter, and I had a feeling. I said, we're going to go see the Miss Fireball contest. And we went. She won the contest. And she looked a lot like me when I was 17 or 18. And we thought, okay, so we hired her. So she started out, she was 18, playing my kid sister and wound up being my mama.
Isn't that amazing?
I know. Harvey was so great with her. He took her under his wing and he mentored her. He taught her about props. He taught her about lines, how to listen. Don't just wait for your cue, how to do. And Vicki was just like a sponge. And she learned, and, you know, when in Gone with the Wind, when she did that, when she did Vita now in Mildred Pierce, she was brilliant.
Yes.
And of course, Harvey, forget it. He can do everything.
All of them. It really was the A-team. I'm so glad we got to watch these. Okay, Carol, stay with me because we have one more movie to talk about. Mm-hmm. We're going to go 1 year before Mildred Pierce to 1944 for a noir classic directed by Billy Wilder and starring Barbara Stanwyck and Fred MacMurray. Well, Carol, we're nearing the end of our Sundays with Carol Burnett series, but we're ending with a great one, which is Double Indemnity from 1944, directed by Billy Wilder and starring Barbara Stanwyck, who is a real favorite of ours at TCM. Is she someone that you grew up loving?
Yes, absolutely. And I have a story about her.
Yes, please.
I was suing the Inquirer years ago for a false story that they did about me, and I had the nerve and the time and to sue them. And in the morning before I went to the trial downtown LA, I went to see my doctor to get a B12 shot. And there's Barbara Stanwyck. I didn't know her, but she was a patient. So we're sitting, she said, you know, you're going to whip the Inquirer's ass. I said, thank you, Miss Stanwyck, from your lips to God's ears. She said, no, I know. You know how I know? No, she said, my leprechaun told me. The look you have is exactly what I have on my face. I went, yeah. She said, oh, they exist. My leprechaun said you are going to win this trial and whip the Inquirer's ass, and don't you forget it. Well, when she said that, I said, oh, no, I won't forget it, Miss Stanwyck. That's my Barbara Stanwyck.
Was the leprechaun right?
Uh-huh. I whipped her ass.
Oh, my God. That's a wild story. It's not what I was expecting from your I Met Barbara Stanwyck story. But she, okay, now.
She was dead serious.
Wow. But when you think back to her career, she was able to do everything. I mean, she did the melodramas, she did the noirs.
Comedy.
And this movie, of course, was famous because it was the turn for Fred MacMurray.
Right. He'd always done light comedies.
Right. Do you remember what it was like for you to see this and see the difference in him?
Well, I was really young, but I just thought he was great. And then, of course, he was a scoundrel in The Apartment.
Another Billy Wilder.
And Cane Mutiny.
Right. But I think after that, I think that's when he stopped doing the CAD roles because I think too many fans came up to him and said, I don't want to see you do that.
Then he did My Three Sons.
Right, yes, everything changed there. Would you say you are a film noir fan?
I think so. Not so much when I was little. I liked the musicals, you know, Betty Grable and Mickey Rooney and Judy, you know, that was easy in life. But as I got older, you know, into my teens and 20s, yes, then I loved the noir.
We'll talk a little bit more about him after we watch the movie, but beforehand, just people should know that Steve Lawrence is going to play Fred MacMurray in your Double Calamity version. How did it work? Did you try to match up guest stars with particular movies, or were you always just going to do Double Indemnity?
Well, we knew Steve could do it. You know, he was a great singer, but he was one of my favorite sketch performers to work with. We did Double Indemnity, we did Postman Always Rings Twice, we did Laura, we did African Queen, we did Gilda, all of those. And he used to say, if we're running long, cut my song, but don't cut the sketch.
How fun. Well, let's watch the movie and then we'll talk more about your version of it, Double Calamity. Here from 1944, directed by Billy Wilder, Barbara Stanwyck and Fred MacMurray in Double Indemnity. What a great film. Just an absolute classic film noir and maybe a career best for so many of the people involved. Was this one particularly fun before they watch your version of it? Was it particularly fun to do?
Oh, yes. I have to say, I think my wig was better.
Okay, people can decide for themselves. Let's check this out from The Carol Burnett Show in 1973, Double Calamity. That one is fantastic, Carol. And you're right, Steve Lawrence is such a natural fit. I think he was on the show 29 times or something like that.
He was one of the most that we had on the show. And it was always, as I said, he'd say, cut my song, don't cut the sketch. And there was one time when we went into syndication, and so they cut all the musical numbers out. And Steve and his wife, Edie Gourmet, were in the airport one day, and he had only been in the sketches. And these teenage girls ran up and they said, "You're that funny guy in the Burnett show." They had no idea he could sing.
All right.
And he was a delight to work with.
I'm sure he didn't mind people knowing him as a comedian.
Not at all.
Well, speaking of which, what I love about what you do in this one is how you move your eyes separately. And of course, people who know your career well know that when you debuted on Ed Sullivan with John Foster Dulles,
Oh my goodness.
there was you were crossing your eyes during that. I mean, so that's obviously something that you've honed over the years. You have massive control over your
I
eyes.
used to do that in a mirror, and my mother said, "Stop doing that. They're going to stay that way."
Listen, it could also help with a comedy career.
Nothing will ever come of it, she said.
Nothing will ever come of it.
Yeah.
Moms are not always right. There's this one I also love because you change the character. Instead of Walter Neff, it's Leff.
Right.
And that just created so many wonderful moments with left, right. I mean, that the wordplay on it was really brilliant.
That was our writers.
They really knew what they were doing. Was that hard to keep straight on?
In a way. Now, if you watch, there's a scene between Steve and me where we're on the couch, and behind you see a piece of the
lamp.
scenery moving in.
What was that about?
The crew member thought, "Oh, I should have put that lamp there," and he did it while we were doing the scene.
I saw it moving in.
Yeah, we left it in because the scene was good.
What's super fun about this particular sketch is all the gunshots and just all of you reacting to being shot so many times and then coming back. Was that part of the fun of this one, all the physical
Of course,
aspect?
and we had a live sound effects man. He did everything live. So he had a booth up behind the audience where he could watch everything, so that if we had a body fall, he made the body fall. Now, of course, they do it later in editing. They put in the sound. But he was so sharp.
But that makes it a much better experience for the live audience.
Exactly.
And in turn for the television audience.
Exactly.
No, you guys thought of it all.
Yeah.
How many of these do you think you did? I mean, there must have been several dozen of these
Oh my
spoofs
God,
over the
yeah.
years.
And then we did, which we haven't shown here, musicals. We did Showboat, we did 42nd Street, we did Shirley Temple Takeoffs, we did a movie that Betty Grable and Dan Daly did that Rock Hudson and I did a spoof on, all with original music and lyrics. So we did, it was, aside from some couple of characters on my show, which I love doing, like Eunice and Mrs. Wiggins, so forth.
Yeah.
The movie takeoffs were my favorite.
Well, here's the last thing I want to ask you. When you were a young girl with your best friend coming back from the movies and then acting them out, were you acting them out straight or were you acting them out with comedic twists?
No, we were kind of straight. We were kind of imitating what we saw. I didn't have that mindset at that time when I was growing up. I just wanted to be Betty Grable. Yeah.
Well, you got to be all these women, didn't you?
And have a wig and lighting and costumes and
All right.
music, 28-piece orchestra. Hey.
And we got to benefit.
Oh, thank
Carol,
you.
thank you. Can I just say, I'm so glad we had this time together.
Oh, just to have a laugh.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave. I love it.
Let's do this again sometime.
You bet.
Please stick around because coming up next, Jacqueline Stewart will be here with this week's edition of Silent Sunday Night.